Hello, welcome back to my course Worldview Studies. Let me share my PPT so that we can resume. We are actually now talking about postmodernism, as you know, and last time I have covered to tell you the strong and weak points of postmodernism, correct? I have also mentioned some other aspects, but let me summarize the strong points again. The first point is that this worldview, postmodernism, criticizes futile ambitions of man. So one example is Bansky's art to criticize the uh, desire for dominion and of the people. Yeah. And then I further explained that in detail. Secondly, I said that postmodernism has a deep concern for the minority groups. And one good example is the animation film Shrek. And that's why the postmodernism supports some LGBT movement and women and so on. Thirdly, this worldview postmodernism has largely contributed to the development of fine arts and culture. So you can see a lot of piece of arts and architecture and cultural movement. Another good example is the famous pop artwork of Andy Warhol. Here you see Marilyn Monroe is the same person but different images. Again, here Campbell soup is the same but all different. That's the typical feature of postmodernism. And Andy called this a new repetition. Another example is this building, AT&T building in New York, together with the traditional modernistic style with the postmodern style. It's a syncretistic architecture, you can say. Another typical building in Bilbao, Spain, is this Guggenheim Museum, designed by Frank Gehry. So he explained this a combination of the ugly form and the beautiful form at the same time. That's a good example of postmodern building. Fourthly, postmodernism deeply acknowledges the limits of the human being. I have illustrated that there are many books with the title The End. So I have given you some examples like Francis Fukuyama's book, The End of History and The Last Man. Another book, Bill McKibben's The End of Nature, and John Horgan's The End of Science, and Daniel Bell's book, The End of Ideology. Another one, Sam Harris, the book called The End of Faith, and Neil Postman's book, The End of Education. Lastly, Martin Heidegger's book, The End of Philosophy. So you see here, many postmodern thinkers talk about the end of something. Uh, this is, I think, because that postmodernism um, accepts and admits that they have reached the end step of human-centered worldview. In other words, we cannot imagine another worldview after postmodernism, I think. So there cannot be such a worldview like postmodernism or thing like that. So uh, we are facing the end of human-centered worldview here in postmodernism. Now, that can be also a weak point of postmodernism, but let me explain those weak points in detail. I have already explained. Let me give you just a summary. According to this worldview, the word is very vague. So it's not clear what they are talking about. And many other colleagues and thinkers criticized that and pointed it out. A second weak point is, of course, this worldview easily falls into moral relativism because their metaphysical perspective is also relative. There's no grand narrative. So everything is relative. Everything is fragmented. And therefore, ethically, they cannot have an absolute criteria, right? So they have nothing but ethical relativism, situational ethics, and things like that. Thirdly, postmodernism has abandoned the objectivity of truth because there's no meta-narrative. There's no architectonic truth. There's no overarching truth. There's only fragmented truth. There's only parts of truth. So there is no objective truth. Everything is relative. Well, here you see the statement of postmodernism that everything is relative is absolute. For them, they cannot compromise that, right? So there is something absolute here, that everything is relative. So again, this is a clear self-contradiction, isn't it? So they fall into the inner problem. So I mentioned many other cases, many other thinkers who pointed out that kind of problem. And the last point is that postmodernism threatens the existence of science itself. Because for them, science does not pursue objective truth. So you cannot be sure any result of scientific research. Especially Richard Dawkins criticized that very clearly. So I have explained in detail about that problem. Now, what can we say then? What can we offer any kind of alternatives to this postmodern worldview? Well, let me say, first of all, that there needs to be a clear proposal of alternatives to the obscurity of this worldview. We need a clear alternative. because postmodernism is very obscure, very vague. Above all things, we need at least an objective standard, an objective criteria. One must not look over the regional and epochal circumstances, of course, but if one uses this as an evidence to argue for a complete relativism, the society cannot exist. The society would fall into a bigger chaos. You will see the Tower of Babel unfinished. This is because, although it is good that postmodernism emphasizes openness and tolerance, okay, no problem. But if this gives birth to extreme relativism, the very nature of man is threatened because anything can go. You can justify whatever you want. Just do it. Just let things go. Que sera, sera spirit can prevail. And sometimes it can be very dangerous. Number 2, to overcome the weak points of moral relativism, we must have a right understanding of human reason and view of ethics. Whereas modernism overestimated human reason, had a too much optimistic stance, but in the 20th century, we have seen, after going through two of the biggest world wars in human history, it realized that this standpoint was not true. However, postmodernism underestimated and disparaged reason and then fell into the other extreme, that is irrational moral relativism, that anything can go. Therefore, it is important not to lean towards the two extremes and at the same time have a good balance between the two. Number 3, we need to secure the objectivity of truth as well. Because if the objectivity of truth falls apart, we will not be able to gain any form of knowledge. How can you say something sure if you cannot guarantee that the truth is objective? If there is no objective truth, you cannot trust any other statements because all statements are relatively true. It's very confusing, isn't it? Especially, we must not only give up on academic truth, but also the basic and logical truth needed for daily life. You see, 1 plus 1 is 2, not 3 or 4. It cannot, right? If you say it is true that 1 plus 1 is 2, but at the same time, it can be true 1 plus 1 is 3, it can be very confusing, isn't it? And if all meta discourses are deconstructed and only fragments are left behind, just like Jacques Derrida argued, the standard for our lives would be lost. And in that case, the human society will bring about a tragedy of falling into a greater confusion and anarchy. Then we cannot have any consensus, any common ground. You see, everything will be different. Then how can we agree about something? How can we have a common understanding? It's very difficult. Therefore, we need to guarantee and secure the objective truth. Now, the fourth alternative is that we cannot give up on the existence of science itself. This is because we cannot deny the fact that in reality, through the advancement of science, we are not enjoying many benefits. And we must not fall into scientism, which blindly believes the absoluteness of science. But the denial of all academic truth is also the other end of extreme. And therefore, we need to attain a good balance between the two ends. Furthermore, to overcome pessimistic nihilism, which postmodernism will give birth to, we must emphasize the thought that our lives are very valuable and meaningful. Furthermore, we must not only make theoretical arguments, but also show this through our lives. And once this happens, it will be more persuasive to postmodernists. Well, this is the end of my lecture on postmodernism, and these are the references that I have consulted. Well, I would say in conclusion that postmodernism is very influential these days. And we see a lot of strange phenomena in our culture. And we should be very careful about this trend. And I would say that we should not just follow the trend of this worldview. We should not just conform to this trend uncritically. Rather, we should renew our mindset. We should transform ourselves to see what's really going on in this worldview so that we can have a clear position to offer very persuasive alternatives to the weak points of this worldview. And I recommend these books if you have time to look and to read. They are very good references, I would say. Okay, if you have any questions about this course, you can contact with this email address, and you can also take a look at this website. So thank you so much for your attention, and we will stop here and we will move on to the next worldview next time. And thank you, and we'll see you again. Bye.